Hey everybody, Mark Callahan, Mr. Saltwater Tank, coming to you with a question and answer show for those of you that wrote in questions on my Facebook fan page. If you're not following me on Facebook, there's a link at the bottom of the screen. For those of you that do follow me, you saw the post about this show. So here we go, fire away and answer your questions. Now this is going to look different than a regular Mr. Saltwater Tank show because I know you all want more content faster. Easiest way for me to do that is to turn on the camera and start answering your questions. With that, let's get started. Austin wants to know, does the coralline match the drapes? No. All right, Steve says, how satisfied are you with your calcium replacement practice? I'm very satisfied with it, Steve. I have a calcium reactor on this tank. I use calc on my top off, and it keeps my parameters right where I want them with calcium and alkalinity. Steve also wants to know if I'm still doing the LED halide T5 experiment. That's a no. I killed that about 1.5 years ago. I covered that on a former tank update show, so you can go back and watch that. Craig wants to know, who takes care of your tanks while you're gone on trips? Well, Bob, my tank buddy, does most of the maintenance, and then my wife will feed every other day. She tends to forget to feed the fish a lot. I'm sorry, guys. It's not my fault. You can blame her, but Bob does most of the heavy lifting, and he's certainly the emergency guy if something goes wrong. Greg says, you said you never feed supplement your corals. How do you determine the amount of fish to add to your reefs that will provide enough of a bioload that will adequately provide nutrition to your corals without either sending your nutrient levels overboard or adding so many nutrients that would create a way too crowded, stressful environment for the fish themselves? Okay, that's a good one, Greg. How do I do that? One, I don't overstock my tanks. I like fish. I would like to have more fish, and I know the more fish that I have, the more issues I could potentially cause myself, not only with maintenance, but also if something goes wrong. I travel a lot. If the power goes out, yes, I have my Ecotech battery backups, which will help, but the more fish I have, the faster the oxygen in the tank is going to get depleted. So by having less fish than my tank can likely handle, it gives me some leeway to get my fish guy over here to fire up the generator if we have a major power outage. Also, the more fish you have, the more nutrients you're going to have. If you have good gear that should be taking care of your nutrients and you don't overfeed, then you should not have an algae problem or other issues with your tank. This is something that I'm always watching on my tank. I'm watching nutrient levels, I'm watching nitrate levels. I feed about 3 times a day. I know if I go much more than that, especially if I'm putting in a lot of food every time that I feed, then I'm going to have a lot of waste sitting around the tank and it's likely going to send nitrate levels up. Now, some amount of nitrates are okay. In my tank, I have a level of around 5 parts per million. I'm okay with that. I know if I go much above that, then I'm going to start having issues with other things in my tank. So it's a fine line. You got to know your system. I recommend you start slow, watch your nutrient levels, and then you can tweak it. Once you know your system, you say, yeah, I've got to feed a little bit heavy today. Maybe I'm going to go out of town for the weekend. I know I might have a little bit of repercussions with this, or you know this tank can handle a lot more because I'm not overstocking it. I can go ahead and feed heavy if I want to. All right, Chris wants to know, do you think Triton reactors are the new up-and-coming way to export nutrients over a classic refugium? Chris, I think it's another way to get them done, and they certainly can work well, and it's a nice compact footprint. As I've said before about refugiums, unless you have a big one, it's not going to do a lot for nutrient export. So unless you just want to have a refugium because you feel good about having a refugium, it's just not going to take much nutrients out of your tank. Triton reactors can potentially turn the table on that. I've been keeping my eye on them. Something that I'm not going to likely add to this system because I want to add a refugium on here, mainly so I can have a refugium, but also so I can have a frag grow-out area. So I think they can work. I think it's a neat way to do it. If you don't have a lot of space and you want to have some nutrients exports by using a refugium, that's certainly a way to go. Damon wants to know, what current test kits are you using? What current test kits am I using, Damien? They're still on my recommended test kit list. Those are the ones that I use. You can download that kit right there at the link at the bottom of the screen. That tells you everything that I use. That's up to date. That hasn't changed. All right. Steve wants to know, what automation do I do with the Apex? Well, Steve, I used to do automatic water changes with the Apex, and recently I've stopped those. They've been stopped for about 2.5 weeks now. I want to see how my tank's going to respond with no water changes, so I've turned that part of the Apex automation off. The Apex also mixes up the salt water in my mixing tank. That pump, the mixing pump, when I used to store salt water, it would cycle that on every 15 minutes, on and off, to help me save power. The Apex also turns on and off the T5s that I have in my tank, and I have all the feed modes enabled if I need to get in the tank and don't want to have to turn off a bunch of outlets, I just hit a feed mode and it turns things off for me automatically. Of course, it has all the alerts set up, so if temperature gets too hot, pH gets out of whack, it's going to let me know. That way, when I'm all over the world, I can keep an eye on the tank, and the Apex can be watching the tank for me and send me updates. All right, Chris wants to know, do you think it's possible to have a successful tank without doing water changes? Sure, that's possible. Jeremy wants to see a screenshot of my Radion and Vortex settings. There you go. Mark wants to know, what would be your best advice for a sumpless system? Mark, I'm assuming you're talking about an all-in-one type system or a tank without any kind of all-in-one filtration in the back, just a straight tank. My advice there is realize it's going to have limitations. In-tank skimmers, or in the skimmers that sit in the back of those all-in-one tanks, work okay. They never work as good as an in-sump skimmer. That means you're going to need to feed less, understock them. You're likely going to run into nutrient problems quicker than other people. It can still work. You just need to go slower, be more patient, and don't be overzealous with your stocking and certainly with your feeding. So George wants to know, what's your procedure for adding new corals to your tank? George, depends on who I buy it from. Certain vendors are going to quarantine their corals more than I ever could here. For example, Worldwide Corals, Vivid Aquariums, Live Aquaria, Unique Corals. All those guys have such stringent dipping and quarantine protocols that I have lots of confidence in those corals coming in. Also, I'm going to be buying smaller pieces from those places. If I'm buying in a 1-inch frag of SPS, I can look it over and see if there's any damage on there from acrid flatworms. You get a very good look at that. If I'm buying a big colony, that's a different story. Then I'm going to be more concerned about it. I may consider cutting it off the base, or even just taking frags from the get-go to help reduce any infestation of acrid flatworms. All right, how much time do you spend on maintenance each week? Maybe 2 hours? Here's what I do each week. Clean the skimmer twice a week, and I change the filter socks twice a week. Well, okay, so I scrape the glass too because I want to get a really good look at everything inside. And I feed the fish, but that's it. I don't do a lot of heavy maintenance, partly because the tank is set up where I don't need to. I've got good filtration, I've got good skimmer on here, I've got meaty reactors with carbon and GFO. And when I was doing water changes, the Apex was taking care of it for me. I built this system that way on purpose, so I don't have to be married to doing a bunch of maintenance because I don't have a lot of time to do it. So you can see it's hard enough for me to get a show out the door, let alone do maintenance on the tank. Daniel wants to know, thought on Triton System and stopping water changes. Daniel, I think the Triton System is something that really makes a lot of sense. Why are we doing water changes when you need a large water change to make any dent in terms of nutrient control? So why not just stop them and see what happens? That's what I'm doing on my tank. Now, just stopping water changes isn't what Triton's all about. That's how most people know it, but there's more to the system. I'm not going to get into the full Triton system in this question and answer video, but I certainly think it's viable. I've seen some good results, and I trust Isha and Tim and the rest of the guys over there at Triton. I believe in what they're doing. Just don't get caught thinking that all Triton is about is not doing water changes. There's more to it. You have to understand the context on why you're not doing water changes and how the other pieces fit into it. Jeremy wants to know, how long have you been reefing and what got you into saltwater tanks? Jeremy, my dad got me into saltwater tanks. In 1989 for Christmas, he gave me my first saltwater aquarium. It was a good old 75-gallon Perfecto tank. I guess it was a Perfecto. I don't even know if they were around back then. Undergravel filter, crushed coral, bleached coral skeletons. He got me into it. So I've been in the saltwater tank hobby. Started in 1989, so you do the math. It's been a while. Mark wants to know, how do you manage to find any lobster eggs? Well, in the US, they're illegal, so I don't, Mark. Eric wants to know, what's the one thing you did different, you wish that you had done differently from the start, and something that you would change? One thing that I wish I had done differently from the start. I wish I would have bought another house so that I could have a bigger tank. I tell clients all the time, and it is always true. After 3 months, no later than 6 months, you're going to look at the tank and go, seems kind of small. Now this tank is 8 feet long, 3 feet wide, 30 inches tall. It's a nice size. I call it a nice medium big tank. But the dream tank is 12 feet long, 4 feet wide, and 30 inches tall. It's not going to work in this house. So, wish I'd gone a little bit bigger. Jose wants to know, can I have your tank? Absolutely. Everything's for sale for the right price. Nathan wants to know, how's your filtration room going? It's going well, Nathan. I'm still not real thrilled with the slope ceiling, but that's what I had. I'd rather have a sloped ceiling than have no fish room at all. So I still very much enjoy having the fish room. It's nice to be able to walk into the fish room, have your sump at working level, all your mini reactors right there, as opposed to having to crouch down underneath the tank, haul hoses and buckets around. Once you have a fish room, you'll never go back. You'll be forever spoiled. Very happy with the space that I have. Even though it's not ideal, I certainly would not change having a fish room. So there you go. There's a question and answer show for you. What do you think? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Would you like to see something different? Let me know. Leave me a comment. Let me know on my Facebook fan page. There's the link again. I want to hear from you all, because if you like it, I'll consider doing more of it. Till next time, I'm Mark Callahan, Mr. Saltwater Tank. Thanks for writing in on your question and answers on the Facebook page. There's that link again if you don't know where to find me on Facebook. Certainly enjoy your tanks. Have a great rest of your week.